Hello, everybody. We're live, coming to you, a virtually connecting session from OLC Accelerate from Disneyland, as far as I know. And to honor today's on-site guests, we have coffee. And my coffee, which appears to be a Topcast tradition, is that I'm smelling hazelnut, but I don't know what it is. I got it from the campus caf. So I'll let our on-site participants introduce themselves and talk about their coffee.
Hi, everyone. I'm Patrice Prusko, an instructional designer at Cornell University and the on-site buddy. And I'm finishing up some Disney coffee, and we'll happily be switching over to some Starbucks coffee that our guest brought
for us. No, not Starbucks.
Oh.
Yeah, I'll tell you. No, I don't do the Starbucks thing.
I'm Katie Linder. I'm the research director for Oregon State University eCampus and the host of the Research in Action podcast. And hopefully this doesn't, cross me off your friend list, but I am a tea drinker, not a coffee drinker, and already had some this morning. So I am beverageless today.
Oh, that's so sad.
But you know what? It means I'm not going to pour it all over myself. So win all around.
I already had one mistake this morning. That's good. I knew that about Katie, and we're friends anyway. It's a diversity thing.
Yeah.
I'm Kelvin Thompson from the University of Central Florida, where I serve as Director of Online Design and Development Strategy, and the co-host of Topcast, the Teaching Online podcast, where, among other things, we drink good coffee. Despite the fact that this is a Starbucks cup, it's Starbucks Reserve, which is a single origin, super duper computerized, you can't make a bad cup of coffee machine. And it's my double star day. So I have the ginormous cup of coffee because I think I got like 1 million stars for buying this cup of coffee for $27. So,
perfect.
But I actually brought with me a thermos full of Ethiopian Sidamo coffee roasted near us in Winter Garden, Florida by Oxum Coffee, and put it in the French press this morning and brewed that special for you. You people online, you can look at it and you can, AK will share his coffee with you.
You can look and weep.
It's all quiet over in the rest of the world.
Hi, I'm Brittany Brown O'Donnell. I'm an instructional design student at Virginia Tech. I also don't do coffee. I have a soda and some ginger. Happy morning, and glad to be here. Not quite as glad as not being at Disney World, but.
Hi everyone, I'm Sunday Richard, and I'm an instructional designer at St. Norbert College in Wisconsin. Oh. And I have invisible coffee. You all are making me very, very thirsty and needing coffee. But I can wait. But I'll enjoy you sipping on yours.
I think I'll step over to my replicator and get some tea, Earl Grey hot, just for Katie.
Replicator, nice. Nicely done.
So just by chance, I saw Topcast pop in my RSS feed a couple of days ago, and I was really excited that it was about the varying roles of instructional designers. It was an awesome podcast. It's an awesome conversation. I want to talk more about it. I don't want to monopolize the conversation on that topic, but I just wanted to kick it off and ask just really quickly, what at OLC Accelerate do you see the varying roles of instructional designers to be now that you're coming in and seeing colleagues from a lot of different institutions?
You want to start?
That's a good question.
That's a really good question.
Yeah, I guess I feel that sort of the same way every time we have OLC Accelerate or its cousins or its forebears, the International Conference on Online Teaching and Learning. And I kind of look at everybody who's here as sort of a tribe, right? And they're kind of in a related field, but the details get maybe a little bit different. When you start having a nice conversation, you delve in and you find a lot of commonality, but then titles are a little bit different, or specific course development models might be a little different or whatever. And I don't know, it makes for rich conversation, and it sometimes makes up for bad coffee at the conference, which is no slam on OLC, it's just conference coffee. That's why I bring my own to share. So
So a crazy story is this morning, someone connected with me on Instagram, someone I knew from grad school, and said, hey, I'm going to be at OLC. This is a former faculty member who has transitioned to be an instructional designer.
Nice.
And I happened to run into her at the registration desk this morning, which is kind of crazy given the amount of people who are here. And we set up a time to talk later. And one of the things she brought up was she really wanted to talk research. And she feels like at her institution and her team, this is something she needs to be kind of thinking about, and also some market research areas as well, in addition to kind of research on teaching and learning. And I think it really emphasizes just the range of what instructional designers are doing, especially if they're in a smaller shop, they're playing multiple roles, they're having to provide expertise and kind of look into a range of different areas. So I just, I couldn't do the work I do, certainly. And we talked about this on Topcast without the instructional design team that I have at eCampus at Oregon State. So, I mean, it's amazing to me, the range of roles that instructional designers are playing now. And I would imagine that diversity is just going to continue to grow.
Yeah, and just to kind of glom onto that for a second, that it seemed like there was for a moment there was this zeitgeist moment a few months ago where there was like a study coming out every instructional designers, and the one that was distributed via EdSurge, I think got bandied around a lot. That's interesting. Like you, Katie, mentioned this MIT report. There's all kinds of stuff that is worth looking at, and we've got a lot of that stuff in the show notes from Katie's episode with us on Topcast. It's worth a look and sharing with folks who aren't in our immediate circle of instructional design related stuff.
So being affiliated with an instructional design program, kind of like Batman, I'm Bruce Wayne in one department in the morning and the Batman in the evening. The big question is, given the varying roles, how do we prepare future instructional designers? So for us already working in the field, we are keeping up with the newest and coolest, and we're always adding to our repertoire. When somebody's starting from zero, how do you get them to 60 within the normal span of a degree requirement phase?
It's a really good question. So this was something, and it also actually got mentioned on this Topcast episode. There was a regional panel that happened a couple weeks after I recorded that episode with Kelvin and Tom, and that was actually the topic of the panel, was instructional designers and preparing them. And we had folks from around the region who were hiring instructional designers. And there was kind of a range of things that people said. They said there are definitely kind of foundational components that instructional designers need to know, like ADDIE and various other principles and things like that. But also there was definitely a focus on the culture of higher education and how it's different than if you get hired as an instructional designer in a more corporate setting. And especially how do you liaise and work with faculty, which I think is a special skill set for people. I think it's a different population, and especially as we saw in that MIT report, if faculty are going to start to become more engaged in technology and to be more experts in that area, as well as being content experts, more collaboration happening in terms of what happens in programs and departments and courses and different kinds of projects. So those two areas I think were a big focus, the foundational pieces, but then also how do you kind of like the care and feeding of faculty, which is its own special skill set.
Yeah, and depending on what university you're at, that takes on a different, whether you're at a research university versus a teaching college.
I think all that's right. And the only thing I would really add is at home, our family likes to watch So You Think You Can Dance, right? And so, which I can't, so, I don't think that I can dance, but I do like to watch people who know that they can dance. And one of the things that's interesting about that is occasionally a panel of judges who give this masterclass kind of feedback to the participants will sometimes say, you've got all the technique, you've got all the steps, forget all that stuff that you learned and just let yourself out, be present in the moment, that sort of thing. And I think about that with regard to the instructional design thing, that there's all this stuff, all this domain-specific knowledge that all this stuff is taught in graduate programs, different models, Dick and Carey, whatever, the ADDIE process, whatever. But I think stepping back from that and looking holistically at what are you trying to accomplish. And then I think, yes, the culture of higher ed, the specific culture of specific institutions, there's a bit of fetishism, whatever, that comes with instructional design, that you're like, oh yes, we've got to sort of reify instructional design, and some of that you've got to step back to find common ground with teaching faculty, that there's a artfulness and a craft. I think your recently published blended learning, blended course design workbook, I think takes that kind of an approach, more of a thoughtful craft approach, not a classic instructional design approach. Although if you look for it, you would find good instructional design in there, right?
Well, I hope so.
I think so. I think so. So I think that finding that kind of common ground, that's hard. It's hard to do that in a couple of years in a graduate program.
Yeah. Well, and I like you brought up this idea of art and craft, because I think that, and you use some pretty fancy words in there too. I mean, reify, that's hitting
I don't even know what that means.
That's hitting my women's studies, heart.
Not even sure I did it right.
We use that word a lot in my grad program. But the other word I would add to that is just creativity. And I think that that's something that grad programs can really nurture. And also it takes some confidence to really walk into a job and say, I have my own ideas. I have my own sense of what this should look like, and I want to bring those kinds of creative components to the table, whomever I'm collaborating with. So I would, there's certain things I think that can be nurtured. There's other things that can be taught.
One of the things that I've noticed is I think instructional design programs can learn a lot from library science programs, because I think faculty and higher ed has already learned how to bring them into the classroom and bring them into the process. And I think that's what we're struggling with instructional design at some point. It is, you have to figure out how to work with faculty, but you have to be in love with higher ed and want to be part of that system as well. And I think we could learn a lot from library science programs in how to do that and how to bridge that gap sometimes.
Yeah, and I think of partnership with instructional designers in the library is really important.
I think that's true too. I do think that it's kind of like my background's K-12, and a lot of teacher preparation programs. Really bad examples are, okay, I'm about to graduate after 4 or 5 years, and I'm going to go do my student teaching, my internship. Turns out I don't actually like to do this. That would be bad. That would be a non-example. And really successful teacher preparation programs, practically from day one, you're in the classroom, observing, volunteering, helping, and it's that more caught than taught programs that prepare instructional designers. The more that there are other kind of partnerships with folks on the ground at that existing institution or other institutions, if you want to call that internship or externship or partnership or some kind of ship, I think that's helpful too. Because I think you're right. I think, Sunday, that librarians seem to do that kind of stuff better. So we could learn from that.
Having worked at a library for part of my career, I see a lot of crossovers. I used to work at a reference desk, or actually right next to the reference desk, and I picked up a lot of the skills of a reference interview. What is the person actually looking for? Yeah, they say they're looking for this, but are they really looking for that? Or are they looking for something else? And I find that instructional design, especially in the needs analysis phase, is a lot of those common skills, trying to get to the bottom of, whatever the issue is, not just taking the word of your client or your partner about what they perceive the need to be. I mean, it might turn out to be that, but it might not. And this actually gave me an idea. I was actually thinking about how can you work your curriculum so that you have a balance of required practical or practicum experience within each and every course, and also go through the theoretical components, because I think that if people came into a profession and they needed to do 10 clinical hours, let's say, every semester for every class that they take, then maybe by the end of the first semester they might say, man, I really hate this. This is not for me. Or, man, this is so awesome. I know exactly what I want to focus on. Of course, the practical realities is how do you do that? So you might have an instructional design program, but oddly enough, your instructional design team that supports the faculty at your campus might not be so big. So how do you work those partnerships out, especially when the potential mentors might not be available?
Well, and Kelvin, you'd mentioned this idea of blended course design, and I think that's one way of thinking about this in terms of like, especially when you think about blended as like front loaded or back loaded. And this was something that just came up. I did a training at another conference last week where we talked about this. And how can you think about blended courses where you're putting the information content up front and then giving people time to practice, or you're putting the practice up front and then giving people, you know, more information following up with that and helping them to make connections. And I would imagine you could do a mix of both in instructional design to think about what are the ways to kind of foreground with practice, and kind of practicum challenge is letting people make mistakes early on so that they can figure out what they like, what they don't like, what their style is. But also they need to get in there and just kind of troubleshoot things and have, you know, the opportunity to take risks. And I think that that's something that those opportunities allow for. So the earlier, the better, in my opinion, because it gets people out into the field. And really, as Kelvin was saying, understanding, do they like it? I think that's a huge component before they go further with a degree. Is it something they really want to be doing?
And you know, when we work with faculty who are going to be teaching online, we try to encourage them to take an online course, whether it's a MOOC or you know, anything, so they can have that experience of what it's like to be a student. And I'm thinking like that makes sense for an instructional designer also. If you're going to be working with people and helping them design online courses or blended courses, whatever the case may be, it'd be good for them to experience it as well. And I know one university has their instructional designers work with teachers designing classes as part of their coursework.
That's nice.
And
That's
so
excellent.
it's like a double benefit because they don't have that many instructional designers at the university. Rochester?
Nice. I like that. I think it's a good model.
Yeah.
I like, and a couple, for whatever reason, I don't know what's in there. For whatever reason, I'm thinking for whatever today more theoretically, and two references that anybody watching this later on or in real time we could talk about come to mind based on what Katie said and what Patrice said. One is Jerome Bruner's constructivist thinking, big constructivism and Whig constructivism, which if I remember right, beyond the information given, within the information given. I think those concepts are interesting to explore in light of that blended metaphor. And the other one was right there. It was there. You were talking. Apply. Oh yes, experiential learning, like David Kolb, experiential learning kind of stuff. You know, it'd be interesting to look again at those literature pieces in light of this topic. I think that would be interesting to explore.
So I'm just wondering, I know this is a more general question, but I'm wondering what some of the kind of themes that are coming up there, and what are the things that you see as the kind of running force for this conference. I know I was just at Open Ed and it was very invigorating because right away it was all about the student and the learning experience and being human. And it was a great mix of like faculty and instructional designers and administrators and that type of thing. And I really appreciated that. And I know that exists on its own plane and that not all conferences are like that. But I know that sometimes themes do arise. And I was wondering if there's anything that you're enjoying happening there, or is there stuff that you are more critical about, or what kind of is the feel? And by the way, Katie, I met you at Eli last year, so I'm just remembering that now. I'm like, she was in a couple sessions with me.
Okay.
So,
well,
I met a lot of people, and I'm sure you did too. So
yeah, no. Well, I mean, that actually connects, I think, to what you're asking. Is like, this is a big conference, not as big as like an EDUCAUSE or something like that, but there's a lot going on. And when you first asked that question, my immediate thought was like, oh, I don't know if I can find a theme. Like, there's so many tracks, there's so many, and especially I think, you know, I come into a conference like this really looking at it from a researcher perspective. I'm looking for the research sessions, you know, more specifically, I'm wanting to network with people. wanting to network with a couple key vendors, that we're thinking of working with, that kind of thing. But I mean, that's a kind of a question I would push back to kind of, I'm curious, do people come with that? Are they coming open, or are they coming like, well, I have really specific things I need to accomplish because I'm here? And I wonder too, if that's also different between people who are experienced conference goers with a particular conference and people who are coming for the first time, who may just be kind of floating around. I think about last week, and I feel like I need to podcast about this topic. I mean, it was all just like networking. That's all I did the whole time. I think I attended 2 sessions.
Which if you need it, it's okay. That's all right.
I mean, it was just, but that's sometimes how conferences go.
Yeah,
so sometimes
absolutely.
the theme is like connection, networking, and it's not even about a topic. But for me, this conference is really about research. And I've seen some really great sessions. I'm excited. I'm presenting a couple on research, but also just to see more sessions on research here at OLC is really exciting. And I know they've been working really hard on that. So that's where I'm going to be looking.
So the conference hasn't really officially started. Like, they've had some workshops going on, but the presentations don't start until this afternoon. And so I feel kind of the same. Like, I've connected with a few people, but really see what the theme is. But something that I've been wondering, and I would pose, is what draws people to this conference? Like you're saying, like at Open Ed, it draws a certain type, so to speak, of people. And I think it's much more of a mixed bag here because it's such a big, but I'm curious for both of you, like what makes this particular conference stand out?
Well, I guess one thing I would say, and Cindy's question is, I think some conferences have personalities. They have identities unto themselves, right? Which I think is what she's getting at with Open Ed. And then I think you can be in the conference experientially, and you can certainly, as it's going out, you can be paying attention if you're not doing too much networking, or maybe even if you are doing networking, themes emerge or whatever. And so I don't think we're there yet with this one, as Patrice said. But here's how I look at this conference, and it's gone through some identity shifts. I'm still trying to figure out what it is we're accelerating. I put my foot on the pedal. I don't know. Are we doing more faster? I don't know. I've asked that question. Nobody can answer it. Whatever. But it rhymes with innovate, and I like the innovate thing, right? So maybe that's good. But I look at OLC Accelerate as it's like this big clearinghouse. It's the go-to online and underneath the umbrella of online blended teaching and learning conference. So there ought to be something in the biggest sense of your tribe of online education. I think it's here, and there's a little bit, for everybody. In the same way that EDUCAUSE is like the big higher ed IT thing, or in the same way that ELI, which I love to go to, is I think of as a more, and this is probably not a fair characterization because it's still a good sized conference, more of a boutique, intimate experience of emerging ideas and technology, not necessarily online, but how does technology support the teaching and learning process? And so I think each of these conferences has I think that's true.
I think OLC has such a range too. I mean, I think about the plans I have for this conference. I'm going to see my publisher. I'm going to see the vendor that we're conducting research with. I'm going to connect with other researchers from other universities. I'm going to attend sessions that are really going to keep me engaged in what's going on with some of the very specific research components we're thinking about. And I'm going to be connecting with people like Kelvin, who I've co-published with on various things. And so there's all these different opportunities of who you can meet with. And it's a pretty broad range. I think about the different kinds of people I network with at OLC, and a lot of them may not know each other. It's not like there's one group and we're all hanging out together. It's actually really different populations of people that we might be collaborating with for different reasons. And so that's something I think is really unique about OLC, is it's not like a group of people where everybody knows everybody else. You're constantly meeting and connecting with new people, and there's new opportunities for collaboration, which I think is really exciting.
No,
I haven't even touched on your questions on that.
No, I realize that the sessions really haven't started happening yet. So that is a hard question, and you guys answered it quite well. And I like the idea, Katie, of what people are coming to a conference with. That matters as well. Like, are you coming for something very specific? And it sounds like, and I think both what I've seen, I'm very new to North America. Actually, I just moved back a couple years ago and to the US last year. So I haven't been part of these conferences. But I think both OLC and some of the educause like Eli are so much more about connecting than anything else. And it just really gives everyone an excuse from a diverse crowd to come together. So I do appreciate that.
But one follow-up point to that, and I think I like that idea of, do you come to give, do you come to get, do you come to network? I think all those are valid. But then I think there are these, for those of us at institutions, especially, it seems like public institutions, sometimes there is this pressure, right, of, okay, you got on the program, you go to the thing, and then I don't know about anybody else, but sometimes it's like, okay, so you went to stuff and you bring back value. Okay, I got notes for you on this, and I got notes for you on that, and here's the slides for this, and okay, because it was expensive, and you flew me out there, and I want to, and which I think is also appropriate,
completely relevant.
But balancing all of that is exhausting.
Well, and I found that social media for me is a really nice way to help with that, because live tweeting back to the folks at my campus who are not here, they can see what I'm engaging in, what kind of questions I'm asking, especially when you start taking photos with people. It's like, I'm here, my little introvert self is networking my tail off. And I think that's, and also what's really interesting, especially about that point, Kelvin, is I think conferences that might not come to fruition until 6 months from now, where someone reaches out and says, hey, I remember your session, can we talk about a collaboration or a partnership? And I think, even a year, I just popped by the 3Play Media table a year ago at this conference. I engaged them and said, would you like to sponsor our research on captioning? And they did. And we put out the report, the first report, last month. So that wouldn't have happened if I wasn't here, maybe not in the same way. Could I have called them up? Sure. But, being able to network with them at that conference was significant.
That's excellent. Maybe another plug for that comment about ongoing dialogue. Maybe I'll put Patrice on the spot. So two things that come to mind, two podcast venues that I think emerge from this kind of stuff. One is your Women Who Wine and EDU, right? Those are conversations that started at kind of these individual leapfrog conference experiences, and then you're filling in the gap in between, right?
Exactly.
And then more recently, the Innovation Labcast podcast started at last year's OLC Innovate and the Innovation Lab, and those folks are continuing those things now. Those are interesting models, right? Does that feel right? I mean, is that?
Oh yeah. So we do a monthly podcast called Women Who Wine in Education, and we have a fabulous little trademark. Thank you, Kelvin.
Oh yeah, no worries.
And so we all met at OLC conferences, and we, and back in the old days, they had three. There were 3 of them a year. And
yes, I've read this in the history book.
Yes. And so we found that in between the conferences, we were, connecting in hangouts, asking each other questions, talking about struggles we were having, and from those conversations grew our podcast.
Which is cool.
Yeah, love that.
Neat model.
By the way, it was mentioned at Open Ed, there was a few people that were like, I love that podcast.
It's the wine. Some podcasts, you need to start bringing tea into your podcast.
Clearly.
Right? Because Women Who Wine and EDU, there's wine. Innovation Lab cast has whiskey and other harder beverages. We just have coffee.
Clearly, I am falling behind on this beverage theme that's going on.
That's right.
So OLC Accelerate, maybe it's Accelerate Connections. That's what I'm hearing from you guys.
Ooh. I like
if we had to accelerate other things, what are the things that you would accelerate, like your projections?
That's a good one.
Well, not to beat a dead horse, but research. We're still trying to figure out so many things about distance ed. There's so many things we just haven't been doing for very long. The quality of it has just increased so much, even in the last 5 years. New tools are available. And I think we're starting to develop stronger relationships between researchers, vendors, faculty, instructional designers, all those things. And I think also one of the challenges of research is people can say it goes too slow. It's not iterative enough. It's not, and so the design-based research models that are really trying to crank out some data in a pretty quick way. So I think that's something we're still kind of thinking about is how can we accelerate it? Does it hurt the quality? of the outcomes? Does it help us still answer the same questions, especially for things like longitudinal studies, which we still need? So yeah.
That's good.
Go ahead.
I'll maybe add to that.
Okay. So speaking of research, I remember a few years ago there were discussions with colleagues. What is an instructional designer? What is an educational technologist? What is an instructional technologist? What is this? I mean, we were really hung up on titles.
Did you figure that out?
Did we? I don't know. I'd have to look at my meeting notes. Probably not. But we did have some really nice buckets that we could like throw in, like, well, this trait goes here. Well, no, wait, this trait is cross-listed. I think what we basically came out with was we're all the same, but uniquely different at the same time, and our strengths lie in working together. So in thinking about research, one of the criticisms that I've had is sometimes research is neglected in how we train instructional designers. We go through this process, the Dick and Carry, the Addy, the Assure, the whatever, and we do read research, but we don't really practice it. What sort of feelings do you have on the practicing of research? Is it important for instructional designers to practice research to be able to really appreciate it and be able to contribute back, or is it sufficient enough for instructional designers to be consumers?
Wow, that's big.
I have a lot of feelings about that.
Well, we could fill up the remaining 27 minutes with that.
Yeah, no, that's a question that I've been thinking about a lot, actually, and we're starting to think about a research project through eCampus Research Unit that's really looking at, in particular, the professional development of instructional designers and how they're trained in terms of research, because I do think they have such an important role on the ground working with faculty, and that's some of what we got into in this Topcast episode recently. But I do think that there's one of the things I see in terms of people who aren't super research literate is a conflation between research and evaluation and assessment. And I think that especially in programs that might be really assessment heavy, and to be honest, I don't know much about instructional design programs and how I'm not trained as an instructional designer. I've not gone through that, but I would guess that assessment is a big part of what, and evaluation is a big part of what the training includes. And I think that that's a challenge for people to kind of make between assessment and evaluation and research. And also I think people think of research as being very intimidating and, that they're not real researchers. And I think that that's something that we need to get over. And so there's a session I'm doing here with a researcher from Penn State, Andrea Gregg, and we're talking about research literacy and what is it? And can we all just get comfortable with the terminology? And I mean, I'm a research director and I do not feel like I know everything about research. I'm certainly not trained in everything. I'm not a statistician. I mean, there's lots of things that I can't do as a researcher. But I can still lead a unit that's thinking about these things and framing questions that are important to our field. So, I mean, I think that that's a big piece of it, is helping people to feel comfortable with it, and also knowing that you're not going to leave any program, master's degree, PhD degree, feeling like oh, I'm a researcher now, I really understand it. I think it's a rare student that leaves a program really feeling like they have it
and they're
down.
Probably wrong.
And they're probably wrong, yes. I mean, I think it takes a lot of experience, a lot of collaboration to really figure out, what research is and how to do it well. So I have a lot of feelings about this. I think, instructional designers are so key to successful research initiatives, and however we can engage them, whether it's during the degree or post-degree in terms of professional development in that area, is huge.
Mentioned the great research that Tanya Justin is doing with DETA. It's DETA, and they've actually put together a toolkit, and it has some different survey questions and research designs, and it's that's really accessible online, and a lot of great research results are starting to come from what they've done.
I think those are all good things. Some related concepts I'll throw out here in response to your question, AK, is the culture of evidence. Evidence or data-driven decision-making. as part of this group trying to examine, well, what does it mean to help foster a culture of evidence in our professional community? And I was a little bit of the odd duck out because, while I have and do conduct research, I don't consider myself a, researcher, primarily. And so I was kind of the other folks there were folks who that's the center point of the bullseye for them, directing research things. And I kept trying to pull the conversation out of, they were going to research the language of research. And like, well, no, a culture of evidence need not be square in the research space, right? There's all kinds of evidence and evidence-based practice kind of things that should be going on. And so I think so this is the flip side of your question. I think that we're comfortable with that. And we have operational, institutional kinds of data on which we base decisions intelligently. And yes, in addition, we need to be doing meaningful research of a variety of ways, from different research traditions, different research genres, right? However you want to slice that pie, qualitative, quantitative, positivist, post-positivist, what a criticalist, whatever. And nobody can know all of that stuff, and we need a diversity of voices and diversity of approaches in order to understand things better.
That's so key. To your point, Kelvin, there is a Research in Action podcast episode on data-driven decision-making with Lena Atuk, talking about this. And particularly, we had a really interesting conversation around anecdote as data. Because I think that oftentimes we'll just throw out anecdotes and say, either we want to rely everything on this anecdote or we cannot rely anything on this anecdote. And so we talk a little bit about that. So if that's of interest to you, I think it's maybe number 4, if I remember right.
I don't know how I've missed that, but I'll go back and listen to that. That's a good one. To glom onto that and support it, I think it was my UCF colleague Chuck Jubin who coined the phrase, absent data, anecdote trumps.
Yeah, it's true. It's really true.
And I find when working with science and engineering faculty that research always comes up. They want to know, what research has been done to support that I should be doing this. And what they're always asking, what's the evidence? Because that's their mindset.
Well, and speaking of collaborations between instructional designers and faculty, I think that's part of the culture.
Yes.
Feeling comfortable enough with the literature that you can share it, even if you don't know necessarily how to do it, how to speak the language, what certain words mean. But also I think, and I think you raised this a little bit, Kelvin, that research can be gatekeeping in terms of just who understands it, who doesn't, who feels comfortable with it. And I think that one of the goals of our research unit for sure is to build community, but also to really help people feel more research literate and to feel more comfortable. And especially if you come from one camp, you're qualitatively trained and you need to know quantitative or vice versa, or you have no idea what mixed methods are or design-based research. I mean, there's all these kinds of things. And it can just feel intimidating. So I think it's really important to say what you don't know, ask questions, and connect with people who can help you learn more.
No, I think that's excellent. And I won't rehash our Topcast episode where Katie guested and we talked about some of this stuff, but for all of that, and then there's a place for, in some situations, instructional designers do have a faculty role and do have a scholarly output requirement. And I think that in some ways is helpful because it means that there's a very similar pressure, hopefully not cast quite as direly as publish or perish, but there is some positive pressure in terms of scholarly output, and I think then you work together. There's a reason to work together more.
Sure, motivation.
I'd actually just like to mention something that came up at OpenEd. There was a group talking about how important narrative research is in the field of educational technology and in this field of data. Making sense of the data and how important narrative research is in this. And they were just kind of starting out, and I could name everybody in that session, but they're wanting to get together and bring people in, and I think they're going under #Sonar. So I think that's a really important piece to this. But I totally appreciate, it's almost like artist. Like nobody wants to call themselves artist.
Right.
Because you feel like, so researcher is the new artist. Like I'm not a researcher, but I'm interested in it. Or I do these types of collection and like you said, basing things off data and what you are seeing.
All right, I got something for you now. So here's the book, Sunday, that you and Katie are going to collaborate on writing together. Are you ready?
Please.
I'm ready.
So Julia Cameron years ago wrote this book called The Artist's Way.
Yeah,
and
love that one.
It is. It's wonderful, and it sort of has a workbookish kind of a thing, and it's exactly this point. You know, we live in the shadows. We don't want to own our own artistic identity. So you're going to write The Researcher's Way.
I like that.
I'm ready.
I like that.
Bring it.
All right. Collaboration started.
And I guess we'll need to have a follow-up meeting for that to check on your progress.
Right.
It reminds me a little bit of, not putting a label on something, because as soon as you put a label on something, you're immediately othering other things, and you want to be inclusive. So if you're a researcher, then maybe you're not emphasizing your role as a designer, in the case of designers as faculty. Or if you're a researcher, maybe you're othering the role of the teacher. If you're a faculty member who has teaching and research responsibilities. It's very interesting. And seeing people from a holistic perspective is something that I think is something that we should be doing, and we should be looking more deeply. So not just, this guy researches and publishes and that's the contribution, but what about the fantastic teaching and inspiration that they have in the classroom?
Yeah, I think you're making me think. So the next book I'm working on right now is on online identity and how we think about ourselves online. And more practical. I'm big into practical books, but it makes me think of things like Twitter bios and what are the words you use to describe yourself. And a year ago, I wouldn't have said podcaster, but now I'm a researcher, I'm an author, I'm a podcaster, I'm all these different kinds of things. And we all have these really unique blends of how those things impact each other. And I think it gets to that, and especially in a more personal way, or identity, and what are you calling yourself? And how do you, when someone asks what you do, what do you tell them that you do? And it's kind of hard sometimes, I think, for different roles we have in academia. They're really weird. Nobody understands us but our tribe, that kind of thing. And if I'm on a plane, I'm not really going to say I'm a podcaster. Like, what do people, they don't know what that means. Sometimes I say I'm a writer. I do grants, I do articles, I do books, all these other things. But I think that gets to that too. It's not just how other people see you, it's about how you see yourself and the kinds of words that you're using to describe your own work and your own professional life. So it's something I've been thinking about a lot lately as I'm working on this book, talking with a lot of people about it at conferences.
Which is metaphors are destiny. And so in that sense, your own identity conceptualization is destiny as well, when you call out in yourself, I guess.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, I don't know if you follow Bonnie Stewart's work, Katie, but she's done a lot of stuff in that, a lot of research in identity pieces for academia especially. But
I will definitely, I'm an early
part of Sonar.
Everybody send me all of your references because I'm piecing things together. So love to hear different people that I can look at. Thank you.
Yeah, I will tweet out the Sonar group as well.
Yeah.
So one question that came in over the Twitter stream, Cindy Jennings asks says that she attends every year, and she is wondering why the word accelerate is a good thing.
I like that question a lot. Well, and I think about the book, I don't know the authors, but the book that came out recently, The Slow Professor, I don't know if people are familiar with that, and it's talking about, slowing down and things like that. I think in technology, we do have this tendency to, the more, the faster, the better. And I think that's also the tension we see between research and some of the stuff in distance ed. Research can be a little bit slower. So I like raising that question. I think it's important to think about for sure.
Yeah, I went the same kind of direction. I was thinking, because it kind of the flip side of there's a deliberateness and simplifyingness and all that to the opposite of accelerate. I'm sure the OLC folks would not like us to explore this too much further, but I think it's a very valid question.
Maybe it'll become OLC unaccelerate.
OLC, but see, OLC slow doesn't sound good, does it? I mean, just slow children at play. It doesn't sound good.
I sense a hashtag. We need something to kind of help people generate a new word that can help us here.
Leave it to Cindy.
It reminds me of a restaurant close to where I live. I think the tagline is unexcelled cooking. And when you look it up, it's more like rustic cooking, take your time, slow. But as you're driving, on a major highway, it's like unexcelled cooking. Why would I want to go there?
Yeah. It's a little questionable.
Like bad food, poor service.
And I want to be respectful of your time. I know we're almost hitting an hour.
Yeah.
So with that, I just want to see if Brittany or Cindy Lou have any other questions or comments before we head off for this session.
I'll just say I'm excited to look into the podcasts. So thank you very much. It was nice having this convo with you.
Those are accelerating.
Yeah.
Is it just me? I mean, those are accelerating.
Yeah, they're everywhere. And especially higher ed podcasts, I mean, they're just growing. I think we tweeted out a bunch of different ones with the OLC Accelerate hashtag about, if you're traveling, check out these different ones. Right. And then the panel we're doing is with a bunch of folks too. But I mean, even last year, there was like a couple of us and now there's like 10. Right. So there's a bunch of different options for people. And I think.
And they're picking, I can't keep, I subscribe left and right and I can't keep up. And I'm constantly surprised by how did I not know this was going on for a couple of months already? So I think that is good. There's plenty to choose from.
Yeah.
Cool. So Brittany, anything? Don't mean to put you in the spot.
No, I look forward to checking out the podcast too, and thanks for talking with us. Conversation.
Thanks for joining in.
Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
And everybody joining us asynchronously, don't hesitate to reach out via Twitter, or if you're on site, come up and find one of us. I'm going to be carrying around this thermos of coffee for the rest of the day with some cups. So, if you're here.
I'm going to tweet that out. You better watch out.
He'll be swarmed at some point. Right?
Low swarm.
Kelvin is the purveyor of good coffee. So if you see him at Accelerate, go up with one of those little teeny tiny sample cups and get a swig of whatever's in that thermos.
That's right. Whatever's in that thermos.
So thank you, everybody. Thank you on site. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, virtuals. Thank you to the viewers that we have live and to the viewers that will be watching this afterwards. For virtually connecting, this is AK. We have more sessions, so keep an eye on the blog post for that. And until we see you again, be well.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Bye.